Okay, now let's go ahead and add a loop to our script. I'm going to pull up the data table that we've been using, and I'm going to insert a new column so that we have something to loop over. I'm going to create a date column, and what I'm going to do is create multiple dates. That way we can create a loop that will loop through and create an order for each date. I'll call it good at 3, and it will get the price for all 3 too once we're done. So we can close this. First, we want to look at the script and think about how it will break the loop, or what we need to do to make the loop work. So we're hard coding the date right now, and we want to read that from our data table. So this should look fairly familiar to you. Column name, global spreadsheet. There you go. And after we're done creating our order, we need to add another line to get the flight application ready to do a new order. So the great thing about QTP is that you can stop and record from wherever you want in the script. So I have my flight application here. I have my cursor, oops, not a breakpoint. I have my cursor here, and I'm going to hit record, and I am just going to click this new order button. We don't need that. That part is not needed. So we can hit stop. And let's scroll down. So we don't, because our script will not need this pop-up window, we won't be in the middle like I was. And we don't need this activate because that window will already be the active window. So that's ready. What we need to do now is actually create the loop. So we're going to need to create a variable. In QTP or VB script, I should say, to create a variable, you use dim, the keyword dim, and then the variable name. We're going to use row count. Now, a variable is like an empty box. So in that empty box, we're going to put in how many rows of data there are. That way we can go through and loop that many times. So right now, row count is an empty box. There's nothing in it. So what we need to do is actually fill it with something. So we're going to use row count equals, so we're setting a value to it. And we're going to use a data table method. First of all, we need to get sheet, and it will be, as you've guessed, the global. And then we're going to use get row count. What this will do is count how many rows of data there are. Since there are 3 dates, it should count 3. So now that we know how many times we need to loop through, we need to actually make the loop. So we're going to use a while loop. There's a number of different ways to do this, so don't feel like you just have to do it the way I do it. But I'm going to do a while loop. So as long as row count is greater than 0, I want the script to go through and do this. Set the date, set the cities, and then create the order. And then at the end, it's going to hit new order. But before we go on to the next iteration of the loop, we actually need to change the row. So right now, if we didn't change anything and we just did the end of the loop and it just looped through this, it would never reset the row, so the price you would only see filled in for one row because it wouldn't ever know to count down the rows and fill those out. Hopefully it'll make sense when I write this out. So we're going to use another data table method. Get sheet global. And then we're going to say set next row. So imagine the first time you go through, it's obviously set on the current row. Then the next time it loops through, it needs to set the row to the next row. That way it fills out all 3 rows of data, not just overrides the first one again and again. Also, row count is an issue. We need to make sure that row count eventually counts down to 0. So when we're done with one iteration of the loop, we need to say row count equal row count minus 1. This way, the first time it goes through, it's at value 3. The second time, it's at value 2. The third time, value 1. The fourth time, 0, it exits the loop. Okay, so now that I have that in place, let's go ahead and try and run this. Hopefully we don't run into anything else that will be a problem, but if we do, we will fix it along the way. Oh, I already thought of something that's going to break. So the next time it loops through, it won't know what flight to pick because the list will be different. So let's go ahead and change that. So I think here we should record a different step. Instead of clicking on the actual row, I'm thinking we can just hit enter and it will select the first one. That way we're not matching on a specific group of numbers. So we'll be at the place we want to be. Let's hit record. Let's pull up our flight application, and here let's just hit enter. We'll hit stop, and then we're going to get rid of these two rows so that we are just hitting flight and then we're hitting enter. We don't need this activate. So let's back up and try it again. You'll probably hit little things like this along the way. It's a good thing to just take a step back and say, what's the error message say? Go look at that line and see, is it not flexible? Do I need to be more nondescript? Do I need to be more specific? Etc., etc. So here it's doing the first one, then see that set next row, it's on row 2 now. And then row 3. And then this next time it'll check row count and it'll be 0, so it won't execute, and then we're done. There you have it. That was our first loop. There are other kinds of loops too to investigate. There's for loops and do loops. So take a look at those if you're interested and keep on scripting.